They threw him away after 38 years, but the land no one wanted made him impossible to erase. Ethan Brooks survived war, loss, and everything in between, but nothing prepared him for the moment his own family replaced him like he never mattered. At 70, with nothing left but an old truck and his loyal German shepherd Shadow, he vanished into a forgotten piece of land in the Wyoming mountains. No power, no water, no hope, or so everyone believed. But beneath that dry, lifeless ground was a secret no one had ever found, and once Ethan uncovered it, everything changed. Before we go further, drop a quick comment and tell me where you're watching from. I read every single one. The suitcase hit the sidewalk harder than Ethan Brooks expected. It made a hollow sound, like something empty being dropped instead of something that had once held a life. Clothes shifted inside. A photo frame cracked. For a moment, Ethan just stood there, staring at it, as if the noise might rewind time and undo what had just happened. It didn't. Behind him, the front door of the house he had lived in for 38 years closed with a quiet, deliberate click. Not slammed, not angry. Final. Ethan didn't turn around right away. He already knew what he would see. The same front porch he had painted twice. The same oak door he had installed himself the summer his son turned 10. The same place where he had once stood in uniform, holding his wife as she cried the day he shipped out. Only now none of it belonged to him. A car door slammed somewhere behind him. Then laughter. Not his. Ethan turned. His wife, and his ex-wife, stood near the driveway, her hand resting lightly on the arm of a man who looked like he could have been her son's age. Mid-30s, clean-cut, confident in the careless way of someone who had never lost anything that mattered. Melissa smiled at something the man said. It was a soft, familiar smile, one Ethan hadn't seen directed at him in years. The man glanced at Ethan briefly, then looked away, as if acknowledging him would make things uncomfortable. Ethan felt something twist deep inside his chest. Not anger. Not yet. Something colder. "Make sure you don't forget anything," Melissa called out, her tone almost casual. "I don't want to have to deal with leftovers." Leftovers. Ethan nodded once. His throat felt tight. "I won't." That was all he said. 38 years of marriage reduced to 2 words. Behind him, the screen door creaked open again. His son, Daniel Jr., stepped out, holding a cardboard box filled with things Ethan hadn't even realized were still his. Old tools, a faded baseball cap, a couple of framed certificates from his service. "You should take these, Chimo," Daniel said, setting the box beside the suitcase. "Didn't seem like Mom wanted them." Ethan looked at his son. Really looked at him. Same brown eyes, same jawline. The boy he had taught to ride a bike on this very street. The teenager he had stayed up with during late-night homework sessions. The man who now stood between him and the house like a quiet barrier. "You could have told me," Ethan said, his voice low. "Before all this." Daniel shifted, uncomfortable. "Dad, it's been coming for a while. But you knew that." "I knew things weren't perfect." "That's not the same." Ethan let out a slow breath. "No, I guess it isn't." From the porch, Melissa's voice cut in again. "Daniel, we don't have all day." Daniel hesitated, then gave Ethan a quick nod. "You'll be okay," he said. "You've got the money. You can get a place. Start over." Start over, at 70. Ethan almost smiled. Almost. "Yeah," he said. "I'll figure it out." Daniel nodded again, relieved to hear something that sounded like acceptance. Then he turned and walked back inside without another word. The door closed behind him. Ethan stood there, alone on the sidewalk, with a suitcase, a box, and a life that no longer existed. A soft weight pressed against his leg. Ethan looked down, Shadow. The German shepherd sat close, his dark eyes fixed on Ethan's face, alert and steady. His ears twitched at every sound, every shift in the air, as if the world had suddenly become hostile territory. Ethan reached down, resting a hand on the dog's head. The fur was warm, solid, real. "You stayed," Ethan murmured. Shadow leaned into him just slightly, the only one who did. Ethan picked up the suitcase. The handle dug into his palm. He grabbed the box with his other hand, then paused for one last look at the house. The curtains were different. The porch furniture had been rearranged. Even the flowers by the steps, flowers he had planted, had been replaced. It was already becoming someone else's life. Ethan turned away. The old pickup truck waited at the curb. Rust along the edges. A dent in the rear panel. The kind of truck that didn't pretend to be anything it wasn't. And he set the suitcase in the back, placed the box beside it, then opened the passenger door. "Up," he said. Shadow jumped in without hesitation, settling into the seat like he had done 1,000 times before. Ethan walked around to the driver's side, paused, and rested his hand on the hood. For a moment, everything felt strangely quiet. No shouting, no arguments, no explanations. Just empty. He climbed in, started the engine, and pulled away from the curb. In the rearview mirror, the house grew smaller. Melissa stepped onto the porch, the younger man beside her. She laughed again, her head tilting back, sunlight catching her hair. Ethan kept driving. He didn't look again. The road stretched out ahead, unfamiliar and uncertain. He had no destination, no plan. He had just a check for $30,000 sitting in the glove compartment, and a question he didn't know how to answer. Where do you go when everything you built is gone? The engine hummed steadily beneath him. Beside him, Shadow shifted, then rested his head lightly against Ethan's arm. Ethan's grip tightened on the wheel. "I made it through worse," he said quietly, though he wasn't sure if he was talking to the dog or to himself. But as the town faded behind him and the open highway swallowed the last pieces of his old life, the truth settled in with a weight he couldn't ignore. War had taken things from him. But this was different. This was personal. And for the first time in a long time, Ethan Brooks had no idea what came next. The highway stretched forward in a long gray line, one cutting through fields that slowly gave way to hills, then to something wilder. The sky felt bigger out here, emptier. Ethan drove without a destination for hours. Gas stations came and went. Small towns flickered past, like half-forgotten memories. One main street, a diner, a hardware store, a church. Places where people still knew each other's names. Places where a man like him might have once fit. But not anymore. By late afternoon, the sun had started its slow drop toward the horizon. The light turned golden, casting long shadows across the land. Ethan pulled into a gravel turnout overlooking a stretch of open valley and shut off the engine. Silence. Real silence. No traffic. No voices. No reminders. Just wind brushing over dry grass. Shadow shifted beside him, then jumped out of the truck, stretching his long frame before trotting a few yards away. His nose lowered to the ground, moving slowly, deliberately. Ethan stepped out and leaned against the truck, arms folded. "I got 30 grand, he muttered. "That's what 38 years is worth." The words tasted bitter. Shadow paused, glanced back at him, then returned to sniffing the ground. Ethan let out a breath. "Yeah, not your problem." The dog didn't care about money, or houses, or divorce papers. Shadow only cared that Ethan was still here, that he hadn't left, that he hadn't broken. Ethan straightened, looking out across the valley. He had a choice. Find a cheap apartment. Live quiet. Wait out whatever years he had left. Or... He didn't finish the thought. He got back in the truck. The idea came later that night, and in a motel room that smelled faintly of bleach and old carpet. Ethan sat on the edge of the bed, a small lamp casting weak yellow light across the room. The TV flickered silently in the background, some late-night show he wasn't really watching. His phone lay in his hand. Real estate listings. He didn't know why he had opened them. Maybe because he needed something to focus on. Maybe because the alternative was thinking. Land for sale, he muttered. Shadow lay on the floor near the door, head up, watching him. Ethan scrolled. Small houses, too expensive. Condos, worse. Fixer-uppers that needed money he didn't have. Then something caught his eye. 5 acres. Wyoming. Price $9,500. Ethan frowned. That alone was enough to make him suspicious. He tapped the listing. The photos loaded slowly. Dry land. Rocky. Has no structures. No visible water. No road. Just a stretch of empty terrain under a hard blue sky. The description was blunt. Unimproved land. No utilities. No water access confirmed. Remote location. Buyer assumes all development costs. Property has been on market for 7+ years. 7 years. No one wanted it. Ethan leaned back slightly. That figures. But he didn't scroll past. Something about it held his attention. Maybe it was the emptiness. Maybe it was the fact that no one else had wanted it. Maybe it was because no one else had wanted him either. He looked down at Shadow. The dog's ears twitched. You ever been to Wyoming? Ethan asked. Shadow blinked. Didn't think so. Ethan stared at the photos again. There was one image that stood out. A slight dip in the land near a rocky ridge. Barely noticeable. Oh, but something about the way the soil changed color. He narrowed his eyes. Could be nothing. Probably was nothing. Still. He clicked on the contact number. The drive took 2 days. The further west Ethan went, the more the world seemed to strip itself down to its essentials. Fewer buildings, fewer people, more sky. By the time he crossed into Wyoming, the land had changed completely. Wide, open, unforgiving. The air felt drier, the wind sharper. They reached the turnoff just after noon on the second day. A dirt road, barely visible from the highway. Ethan slowed the truck, then turned onto it. Dust kicked up behind them. The road twisted through low hills and scattered rock formations, narrowing as it went. The truck rattled over uneven ground, tires crunching over gravel and loose stone. Hope this thing holds together, Ethan muttered. Shadow sat upright, alert. 10 minutes in, the road got worse. 20 minutes, and it barely looked like a road at all. By the time they reached the property marker, a faded wooden post leaning slightly to one side, Ethan wasn't even sure how he'd get back out if it rained. He shut off the engine. The silence hit again. Different this time. Heavier. Ethan stepped out slowly. The land stretched out in front of him. 5 acres of nothing. Dry earth cracked in places. Patches of stubborn grass clinging to life. Scattered rocks. A ridge of darker stone rising along one edge. No trees worth mentioning. No shade. No signs of water. Yeah, Ethan said quietly. They weren't kidding. Behind him, Shadow jumped down from the truck. For a moment, the dog stood still. Well, then something changed. His ears snapped forward. His body stiffened. Ethan noticed immediately. What is it? Shadow didn't answer. Couldn't. But he started moving. Not randomly. purposefully, straight toward the far side of the property. Ethan followed, boots crunching over dry ground. "Hey, slow down." But Shadow didn't slow. He moved across the land like he was following a scent trail, weaving slightly, then correcting, always pulling toward the same direction. Ethan felt a flicker of something. Instinct. The same instinct that had kept him alive overseas. Something's here. Shadow reached the base of the rocky ridge and stopped. He lowered his head, sniffing intensely. Then he started digging, fast. Dirt kicked back behind him. Ethan walked up, watching. "What are you—" He stopped. The soil here was different, darker, cooler. He crouched down, running his fingers through it. Not as dry, not as dead. Shadow kept digging, whining softly now, focused. Ethan looked up at the ridge, then back at the ground, then at Shadow. "You found something, didn't you?" The wind picked up, carrying a low, distant sound through the rocks. For a brief moment, Ethan felt it again. That strange pull in his chest. Not fear, not yet. Something else. Something waiting. He stood slowly, scanning the land in front of him. 5 acres no one wanted. 5 acres no one believed in. Ethan looked down at Shadow, still digging with quiet determination. "Yeah," he said under his breath. "Maybe they just didn't know where to look." The wind moved across the ridge with a low, hollow sound, like something whispering through stone. Yet Ethan stood there a moment longer, staring at the patch of disturbed earth where Shadow had been digging. The soil was darker, cooler, not like the rest of the land, but the sun was already starting to dip. Whatever was here would still be here tomorrow. "All right," Ethan said, straightening. "We're not solving anything before dark." Shadow stopped digging, panting lightly, then looked up at him. There was something in the dog's eyes, focus, intensity, that made Ethan uneasy in a way he couldn't quite explain. "Come on," Ethan said. "We set up first." The first night on the land came fast. The temperature dropped harder than Ethan expected. The warmth of the afternoon vanished with the sun, replaced by a dry, biting cold that crept into his bones. He set up the small tent near the truck, choosing a spot that gave him a clear line of sight in every direction. Old habits. Always know your surroundings. Always know your exits. He secured the corners, checked the ground twice, then built a small fire using what little dry brush he could find. Shadow stayed close, watching everything. Not restless, alert. Ethan noticed. "You're still thinking about that spot, huh?" Shadow's ears twitched. Ethan sat on a folding stool, rubbing his hands together in front of the fire. The flames flickered weakly, casting long shadows that stretched across the empty land. Out here, there were no streetlights, no houses, no distant glow from a town over the hill. Just darkness, pure and complete. Ethan hadn't seen darkness like this in years. Not since. He shut the thought down. "Different kind of night," he muttered. His shadow moved closer, settling beside him. For a while they sat in silence. The kind of silence that wasn't peaceful. The kind that pressed in. The wind picked up again, stronger now, sweeping across the land and rattling the thin walls of the tent behind them. Somewhere in the distance something shifted, rock against rock, or maybe just the wind playing tricks. Ethan's eyes narrowed. Listening. Always listening. The fire cracked. Shadow's head lifted suddenly. Ethan saw it immediately. "What?" The dog's body stiffened. A low growl rumbled in his chest. Ethan felt his pulse quicken. He turned slowly, scanning the darkness beyond the reach of the firelight. Nothing. Just shadows. But the feeling was there. That same tightness in his chest. That same awareness creeping in. Not safe. Not alone. Ethan stood, now every muscle tightening. Easy, he said quietly. Shadow didn't relax. The growl deepened. Ethan stepped forward, away from the fire, into the edge of the darkness. His boots crunched softly on the dry ground. The world seemed to hold its breath. Then, a sound. Sharp. Sudden. Ethan spun. For a split second, the darkness shifted in his mind. Not Wyoming, not a ridge, not open land, sand, heat, gunfire, voices shouting in a language he couldn't understand. "Down!" someone yelled. No, he yelled. Ethan dropped instinctively, his body hitting the ground hard. His heart slammed against his ribs. The firelight blurred. The cold air burned in his lungs. Not here. Not now. Shadow barked sharply, snapping him back. Ethan blinked. The ridge returned. The fire. The empty land. No gunfire. No soldiers. Just wind. And his breath came fast and uneven. He pushed himself up slowly, his hands shaking just enough for him to notice. "Damn it," he muttered. Shadow was beside him instantly, pressing close, his body solid and grounding. Ethan reached out, gripping the dog's fur. "I'm good," he said, though it didn't sound convincing. "I'm good." Shadow didn't move away. He stayed there, leaning into him, steady, real. Ethan took a long breath, then another. The night stretched on. He didn't sleep much. Every time he closed his eyes, the darkness behind them felt too close, too full of things he couldn't control. Twice he woke up convinced he'd heard footsteps. Once he was sure he saw movement near the ridge. Each time Shadow reacted first, ears up, body tense, but nothing ever came. No one. No thing. Just the wind. But by the early hours of the morning, the fire had burned down to embers. Ethan sat wrapped in his jacket, staring out across the land as the first hint of light touched the horizon. The sky shifted from black to deep blue, then to pale gray. The world slowly came back. Shapes returned. Distance made sense again. The ridge stood quiet and still. Nothing moved. Nothing threatened. Just land. Empty land. Ethan exhaled slowly. "You see anything?" he asked. Shadow, now calmer, looked out across the same view. Then, without hesitation, he turned his head, back toward the ridge, back toward the place he had dug. Ethan followed his gaze. The patch of darker soil was still there, untouched since the day before, waiting. He pushed himself to his feet, his joints protesting after the long, restless night. "Yeah," he said quietly. "I didn't imagine it." Shadow stood as well, tail low but steady. The fear from the night hadn't completely faded, but something else had taken its place. Curiosity. Ethan walked toward the ridge again, each step deliberate. The morning air was cold but clear. The light revealed every detail: the rocks, the uneven ground, the subtle shift in color where Shadow had been digging. He crouched down again, running his fingers through the soil. Still cool, still different. Shadow moved beside him and began digging again, faster this time, more focused. Dirt flew back. Ethan leaned in closer. "All right," he said. "Let's see what you found." The ground gave way easier than expected. Too easy. After a few minutes, Shadow's paws struck something. A dull, hollow sound. Ethan froze. He brushed away the dirt carefully, and revealing the edge of something unnatural. Metal. Old. Buried. His pulse quickened. "Hold on," he murmured. He cleared more of the surface, uncovering what looked like the corner of a hatch, rusted but intact. The kind of thing that didn't belong in the middle of nowhere. The kind of thing that meant someone had been here. A long time ago. Ethan sat back on his heels, staring at it. The wind moved softly across the ridge. Shadow stopped digging, standing over the spot, breathing hard but steady. Ethan reached out, brushing more dirt away from the metal surface. A handle came into view. Cold, solid, real. He swallowed. "All right," he said quietly, more to himself than to the dog. "Guess we're not alone out here after all." The metal surface was colder than the air. Ethan ran his hand across it, while brushing away the last of the loose dirt. The hatch was rectangular, maybe 4 feet across, its edges buried deep in the ground. Rust covered most of it, but not enough to hide the shape. This wasn't natural. This was built a long time ago. Shadow stood close, muscles tight, watching Ethan's every movement. His ears flicked constantly, picking up sounds Ethan couldn't hear. "You hear something?" Ethan asked. Shadow didn't take his eyes off the hatch. Ethan exhaled slowly. "Yeah, me too." Not a sound, exactly. More like a feeling. That same instinct from before. The one that had kept him alive in places where hesitation got people killed. Don't rush in. Check everything. Ethan stood and walked back to the truck. He reached inside, grabbing a flashlight, a pry bar, and a pair of gloves from the toolbox in the back. But when he returned, the hatch looked exactly the same. Still, silent, waiting. He crouched again, pulling the gloves on. "All right, Shadow," he said quietly. "We do this smart." The dog lowered his head slightly, as if he understood. Ethan wedged the pry bar under the edge of the hatch. For a moment, nothing happened. Then he pushed. The metal groaned, a deep, strained sound that echoed faintly beneath the ground. Ethan froze, listening. Nothing answered back. He pushed again, harder. The hatch shifted, just a fraction. Rust cracked. Dirt crumbled away. "Come on!" Ethan muttered, adjusting his grip. With one final push, the seal broke. The hatch lifted an inch, then 2. A faint breath of air escaped from below. Cold, damp, different. Ethan stopped moving. That air didn't belong to the surface, or else it had been trapped. For years. Maybe decades. He slowly lifted the hatch the rest of the way. It opened with a long, scraping sound, revealing darkness beneath. Not just shadow. Depth. A narrow set of metal steps disappeared downward into black. Ethan leaned slightly, angling the flashlight into the opening. The beam cut through the darkness, revealing concrete walls, old pipes running along the sides, and a corridor that extended farther than the light could reach. A bunker. No doubt about it. Ethan's jaw tightened. "What the hell were you hiding out here?" Shadow let out a low, uneasy whine. Ethan noticed immediately. "Hey," he said softly. "Stay close." He sat back for a second, thinking. This wasn't just a hole in the ground. This was a structure. Someone had built this for a reason. People had been here. And maybe, more recently than it looked. Ethan clicked off the flashlight. Silence rushed back in. He looked at the open hatch, then at Shadow, then at the empty land stretching around them. There was no one else out here. No help, no backup. Just him and the dog. He made his decision. "All right," he said. He grabbed the flashlight again and stepped toward the opening. Shadow moved instantly, positioning himself at Ethan's side. Ethan lowered one foot onto the metal steps. They creaked under his weight. Old, but still holding. He paused, listened. Nothing. Just the faint echo of his own breathing. "Easy," he murmured. He descended slowly, step by step. The light from above faded quickly as he moved deeper. The air grew colder, heavier. By the time both feet touched the bottom, the world above felt far away. And Ethan turned the flashlight in a slow arc. Concrete walls, a narrow corridor, Dust, old wiring hanging loose in places. No immediate signs of recent movement. But the structure itself, solid, well-built, military maybe, or something close to it. Shadow followed him down, his nails clicking softly on the metal steps before he reached the floor. The dog didn't relax. If anything, he became more alert. Ethan moved forward carefully, sweeping the flashlight across the floor. Footprints. Old. Faded. But there. Someone had been here. Not yesterday. Not last week. But not ancient either. Ethan felt his pulse pick up. "Stay sharp," he whispered. They moved deeper. The corridor opened into a larger chamber. Metal shelves lined one wall, most of them empty or collapsed. A few old containers remained. Now their labels faded beyond recognition. A rusted table stood in the center of the room. On it, a map. Ethan stepped closer, brushing away dust. Topographical. The surrounding area, marked with notes he couldn't fully make out. But one thing was clear. This place hadn't been random. It had been chosen. Strategic. Ethan's instincts sharpened. This wasn't just some forgotten bunker. This had purpose. He moved on. Another corridor. Another room. This one smaller. And then, the sound. Drip. Ethan froze. Shadow's head snapped toward the far wall. Drip. Drip water. Ethan's breath caught. He turned the flashlight slowly. There. A crack in the concrete wall. Dark. Wet. A thin line of water seeping through, trailing down to the floor. Ethan stepped closer, kneeling. He touched it. Cold. Fresh. Real. Not stagnant. Not trapped. Flowing. His mind raced. Underground water. Here. On land that was supposed to have none. He let out a slow breath. "Well," he said quietly, "I think we just found the reason no one could figure this place out." Shadow let out a soft sound, almost like a satisfied exhale. Ethan leaned back against the wall for a moment, the weight of it all settling in. The house, the betrayal, the loss. And now this. A hidden bunker, a water source. A second chance buried beneath everything everyone else had dismissed. He looked at Shadow. "You knew, didn't you?" The dog just watched him. Ethan gave a small, tired smile. "Yeah," he said. "Of course you did." The drip of water echoed softly in the chamber. Steady, persistent, alive. For the first time since he had been thrown out onto that sidewalk, something shifted inside Ethan Brooks. Not pain, not anger. Something else. Possibility. He pushed himself to his feet, turning the flashlight back toward the corridor. "All right," he said. "Let's see what else this place is hiding." The beam of Ethan's flashlight cut through the stale air as he moved deeper into the bunker. Every step felt measured, controlled. The kind of movement he hadn't used in years, but never truly forgot. Shadow stayed close, his body low, ears sharp, scanning every corner before Ethan even looked. The corridor narrowed, then opened into another chamber. This one was different, cleaner, not untouched, but preserved. A row of metal cabinets lined the far wall, their doors rusted but intact. A thick pipe ran along the ceiling, dripping slowly into a shallow trench carved into the floor. Water. More than just a crack in the wall. A system. Ethan stepped closer, crouching beside the trench. He dipped his fingers in. Cold. Clear. He lifted his hand, letting the droplets fall back. "This wasn't luck," he said quietly. "Someone built this to last." Shadow sniffed along the trench, then followed it to the wall, where the pipe disappeared into concrete. Ethan stood, tracing it with his eyes. Collection system. Maybe storage further in. His voice had changed. Sharper. Focused. Not the man who had been standing on a sidewalk with a suitcase. This was something else. Something older. Something trained. He moved to one of the cabinets and pulled. The door resisted, then gave way with a screech. Inside were shelves, mostly empty, but one still held a few sealed containers, old military-style tins. As Ethan picked one up, turning it in his hands. No readable label, but the design was familiar. Rations, long-term storage. He set it back carefully. Cold War, maybe, he murmured. Or someone who knew how to think ahead. Shadow let out a low sound. Ethan turned. The dog was staring down another corridor, one that angled slightly downward. Darker. Deeper. Ethan felt it again. That pull. Yeah, he said. We're going. They moved slowly, the air growing colder as they descended. The walls here were rougher, less finished. More like the structure had been extended, not originally planned. Ethan ran his hand along the concrete. Added later, he muttered. Shadow suddenly stopped. His body went rigid. A low growl built in his chest. Ethan froze. What is it? The flashlight beam swept forward. For a moment, nothing. And then... movement. A flicker at the edge of the light. Ethan's body reacted instantly, stepping back, raising the flashlight higher. The beam caught it. A pair of eyes. Small, reflective, then gone. Ethan exhaled. Just an animal, he said, though his voice stayed tight. Probably something that had found its way in. Still, he didn't relax. Shadow didn't either. They moved forward again, slower now. The corridor opened into a final chamber, larger than the others. And here, the air felt different. Not just cold, alive. The sound of water was stronger here, echoing softly off the walls. Ethan stepped in fully, turning the flashlight in a slow circle. There, at the far end of the chamber, a natural rock opening, partially reinforced with concrete. And from within it, water flowed, not fast, not rushing, but steady. A thin underground stream emerging from the rock itself, feeding into a wider basin carved into the floor. Ethan stood still, just looking. After everything he had seen, this was the moment that hit hardest. Because this changed everything. He walked closer, boots echoing faintly in the chamber. The water was clear, moving, alive. He crouched, dipping his hand into it again. Colder than before. Cleaner. He brought his hand up, letting the water run over his fingers. Then he did something he hadn't done in a long time. He trusted it. Just a sip, small. Careful. The taste was sharp, mineral-rich, but real. Not stagnant, not poisoned. Drinkable. Ethan let out a slow breath. Well, he said softly, I think we just found our answer. Shadow stepped beside him, now lowering his head to drink as well. Ethan watched him for a moment, then leaned back, sitting on the cold floor, staring at the stream. The silence wasn't heavy anymore. It wasn't pressing in. It felt different. Like space, like room to think, room to rebuild. He looked around the chamber again. The reinforced walls, the water source, the structure above. This wasn't just shelter. This was a foundation. Ethan's mind began to move. Fast. Calculating. Water supply. Storage. Protection from weather. Temperature control underground. All the things that mattered. All the things he knew. All the things he hadn't used in decades. All right, he said quietly, his voice steadier now. We've got water. Shadow lifted his head, water dripping from his muzzle. Ethan nodded once. Means we've got a chance. He pushed himself to his feet, turning back toward the corridor. First thing, we clean it up, make it safe, reinforce what needs reinforcing. He paused, glancing back at the stream. Then we build. Shadow followed without hesitation. As they moved back toward the entrance, the darkness didn't feel as threatening. It felt like something else now, something waiting to be shaped, controlled, used. Ethan climbed the metal steps back to the surface, pushing the hatch open into the fading afternoon light. The sky stretched wide above him again. The land still looked the same, dry, empty, worthless. At least, to everyone else. Ethan stepped out, breathing in the cold air. Behind him, beneath his feet, was something no one had seen. Something no one had understood. Shadow jumped up beside him, standing tall, scanning the horizon. Ethan rested a hand on the dog's neck. They left this place alone for years, he said. Didn't see what was right under it. He looked out across the 5 acres, then back at the ridge, then down at Shadow. You found it. Shadow didn't react. Didn't need to. Ethan gave a small nod. Yeah, he said. We're not done here. The wind moved across the land again, carrying dust and dry grass in soft waves. But now, it didn't feel empty. It felt like the beginning of something. And for the first time since everything had fallen apart, Ethan Brooks didn't feel lost. He felt ready. Morning came sharp and cold. Ethan woke before the sun fully cleared the ridge, his body already adjusting to a rhythm it hadn't followed in years. No alarm, no schedule forced on him, just instinct, the kind that never really left. He stepped out of the tent, boots crunching lightly against the dry ground. The air bit at his lungs, but it felt clean, honest. Shadow was already awake, standing near the ridge, watching. Ethan followed his gaze. Nothing obvious, just land. But Shadow didn't look away. You hear something? Ethan asked quietly. The dog's ears twitched. Ethan narrowed his eyes. Out here, silence didn't always mean safety. It meant distance. He walked toward the ridge slowly, scanning the horizon. The land stretched wide in every direction, rolling dry hills, scattered rock, no movement. But something lingered. A feeling, like being watched. He stopped, listened. Then, a faint sound. Not wind, not animals. An engine. Far off. Ethan turned slightly, eyes tracking toward the south. So dust rose in the distance. A vehicle, coming this way. Shadow let out a low, controlled growl. Ethan rested a hand on his neck. Easy, he said. His mind shifted instantly. Unknown vehicle. Remote land. No witnesses. No backup. He didn't move back toward the truck. He stayed where he was. Let them come. The vehicle got closer, the sound growing louder, more defined. An old pickup, judging by the engine's uneven rhythm. It crested the small rise at the edge of the property. Slowed, then stopped. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the driver's door opened. A man stepped out. Mid-60s, maybe older. Lean, weathered face, worn jacket. The kind of man who had spent more time outside than in. He didn't approach right away. Just stood there looking, taking in the land. Then Ethan, then Shadow. Ethan didn't wave, didn't speak. He waited. The man finally started walking, slow and steady, boots sinking slightly into the dry soil with each step. Shadow's body tensed. Ethan felt it. Stay, he murmured. Shadow didn't move. The man stopped a few yards away, close enough to talk, not close enough to trust. You living out here? The man asked. His voice was calm, neutral. Ethan studied him. Just got here, he said. The man nodded once, glancing around. Haven't seen anyone out here in years. Yeah, Ethan replied. That's what I heard. The man's eyes shifted slightly toward the ridge, then back to Ethan. You buy this land? I did. There was a pause. The wind moved between them. The man let out a slow breath. Name's Caleb, he said. Used to work this area. Forestry service. Ethan gave a small nod. Ethan. Caleb's gaze lingered on Shadow. Good dog, he said. Shadow didn't relax. Caleb noticed. Smart, too. Ethan didn't respond. Caleb looked back at the land. This place has a reputation, he said. Yeah? People tried to do something with it. Years back. Never worked. Why not? Caleb shrugged slightly. No water. Soil's wrong. Nothing sticks. He paused, then added, At least, that's what they said. Ethan watched him carefully. You don't sound convinced. Caleb's eyes flicked to the ridge again, then back. Let's just say, he said slowly, I've seen people give up on things they didn't understand. Ethan felt a subtle shift in the conversation. Caleb wasn't just making small talk. He was probing. What brought you out here? Ethan asked. Caleb smiled faintly. Oh, same thing that brings anyone out this far, he said. Something different. Another pause. Then Caleb nodded toward the truck. You planning to stay? Ethan followed his gaze. Yeah. Caleb looked back at him. Long term? Ethan didn't hesitate. Yeah. Caleb studied him for a moment longer. Then he nodded again. All right. He turned slightly, as if about to leave, then stopped. There's a town about 40 minutes east, he said. Small. You'll find what you need there. Supplies. Fuel. Ethan nodded. Appreciate it. Caleb hesitated again. Then, almost casually, he added, Be careful digging around out here. Ethan's eyes narrowed just slightly. Why's that? Caleb looked toward the ridge one more time. Old land, he said. Sometimes it remembers things. Then he turned and walked back to his truck. Shadow watched every step. Ethan didn't move. The engine started again. The truck turned, heading back the way it came. Within minutes, it was gone. Dust settled. Silence returned. But it wasn't the same silence as before. Ethan stood there, replaying the conversation. Caleb knew something. Not everything, but enough. He glanced at the ridge, at the hidden hatch beneath it, at the water below, then down at Shadow. You heard that, he said quietly. Shadow didn't take his eyes off the direction Caleb had gone. Ethan let out a slow breath. Yeah. He turned back toward the land. Everything looked the same. Dry. Empty. Worthless. But now, someone else had seen it. Not the truth. Not yet. But enough to come looking. Ethan felt the weight of that settle in. This place wasn't just his anymore. Not completely. Oh, not if word got out. He looked at the ridge again, then back toward the horizon. The world beyond his 5 acres suddenly felt closer, more connected, more dangerous. Ethan rested a hand on Shadow's back. We move faster, he said. His voice had changed again, more urgent, more focused. We build this right. Shadow shifted slightly, leaning into him. Ethan gave a small nod. Yeah, he said. Because I don't think we're the only ones who know this land isn't empty anymore. The wind carried his words across the dry ground, but they didn't disappear the way they had before. Now they lingered, like a warning. Ethan didn't waste time. By midday, the land looked different, not because it had changed, but because he had. The tent was reinforced, staked deeper against the wind. A rough perimeter had been marked with stones and scraps of metal, subtle but intentional. Not to keep something out, but to know when something came in. Shadow moved constantly, not restless, alert. Every shift of wind, every distant sound, every flicker on the horizon, he tracked it all. Ethan worked. He cleared debris from the bunker entrance, covering it again in a way that made it look untouched. The hatch disappeared beneath carefully placed dirt and rock, blending into the ridge like it had never been disturbed. Then he started hauling. Old scrap he'd found scattered across the land. Rusting metal sheets, broken fencing, pieces of something long forgotten. To anyone else, it was junk. To Ethan, it was material. He built slowly, deliberately. A low barrier near the tent, a raised platform for supplies, and a narrow trench leading away from the ridge. Small, but enough to redirect water runoff if the weather turned. Every movement had purpose. Every structure had intent. By late afternoon, sweat clung to his back despite the cold air. His hands were rough, movements steady, controlled. He stepped back, looking at what he'd built. It wasn't much, but it was a start. Shadow stood at the edge of the perimeter, still, watching. Ethan followed his gaze. There, far out near the boundary, a flicker, movement, too slow for wind, too deliberate for an animal. Ethan's chest tightened. "Stay," he said quietly. Shadow didn't move. Ethan walked forward a few steps, narrowing his eyes. The shape disappeared, then reappeared again, slightly farther along. A person. Watching. Then gone. Ethan didn't chase. Didn't call out. He stood still, letting the silence return. But it didn't feel the same anymore. It felt occupied. He turned back slowly, scanning the rest of the land. Nothing else moved. But that didn't matter. One was enough. By nightfall, the temperature dropped fast. Ethan lit a small fire, shielded low to keep the light from carrying too far. He sat beside it, hands resting loosely on his knees. Shadow lay close, but not asleep. Never fully. "You saw him," Ethan said quietly. Shadow's ears flicked. "Yeah." Ethan stared into the fire. This wasn't coincidence. Not anymore. Caleb showing up. Now someone else. The land wasn't as forgotten as it seemed. Or maybe it had just been waiting. The fire crackled softly. Ethan's thoughts drifted, then shifted, then broke. The sound hit him before the memory fully formed. A sharp crack. Not here. Not now. But his body didn't know that. His shoulders tensed. Breathing shortened. The firelight flickered. And suddenly, it wasn't fire. It was something else. Flashes. Noise. Dust in the air. Voices shouting. Too fast. Too loud. Ethan's hand clenched. His vision narrowed. He wasn't on the land anymore. He was somewhere else. Somewhere he had tried to leave behind. Shadow moved instantly. Up. Close. Pressing into him. Weight. Solid. Real. Ethan blinked hard. The fire snapped back into focus. The cold air returned. The silence. Shadow's body stayed against him, steady, unmoving, grounding. Ethan exhaled slowly. Then again, his hand dropped onto the dog's neck, gripping lightly. "I'm here," he murmured, more to himself than anything. The moment passed, but not completely. It never did. Ethan leaned back slightly, staring up at the dark sky, and stars stretched across it, clear, uninterrupted. He hadn't noticed them in years. Not like this. Not without something else in the way. Shadow settled beside him again, but closer than before. Ethan let out a long breath. "We build faster," he said. His voice was quiet, but firm. "This place. It's not just about surviving anymore." He paused, then added, "It's about holding it." The wind shifted again, carrying something faint. A sound. Distant. Mechanical. Ethan sat up slightly. Listened. There it was again. An engine. Not Caleb's. Different. He stood. Shadow was already on his feet, both of them facing the same direction. The horizon. A faint glow appeared far off in the dark. Headlights. Moving slowly. Not passing by. Coming closer. Ethan's jaw tightened. "Yeah," he said under his breath. Guess word travels faster than I thought." The lights dimmed slightly as the vehicle slowed, then stopped, far enough not to be seen clearly, close enough to be intentional. They stayed there, watching. Ethan didn't move toward them, didn't signal, didn't react. He stood his ground, Shadow at his side. The two of them silhouetted against the small, controlled fire behind them. Minutes passed. The lights flicked off. Darkness swallowed the horizon again. Ethan waited, listened. Nothing. No engine. No movement. Just silence. But it wasn't empty. It was full of intention, full of presence, full of something that had just changed. Ethan exhaled slowly. "They're testing," he said. Shadow didn't move. Ethan nodded once. "Yeah." He looked out across the land, then back toward the ridge, toward what lay hidden beneath it. This place." He shook his head slightly. "It's not worthless." Shadow glanced up at him. Ethan's expression hardened. "It never was." The wind carried across the land again. But now it didn't feel like emptiness. It felt like pressure, like something building. And for the first time since he arrived, Ethan realized something else. This wasn't just about starting over. This was about defending what he had found. And whatever was coming next was already on its way. The next morning didn't feel the same. The sky was just as wide, the air just as cold, the land just as still. But something had shifted. Ethan felt it before he even stepped outside. A tension, like the ground itself was holding its breath. Shadow was already alert, standing near the edge of the perimeter, his posture stiff, ears forward, watching the same direction as the night before. Ethan stepped out slowly, pulling his jacket tighter. "You didn't sleep either, huh?" he muttered. Shadow didn't move. Ethan followed his gaze. Nothing. Just distance. But he knew better now. He walked the perimeter, checking the markers he had set the day before. Small changes. Easy to miss. Unless you knew what you were looking for. One of the stones had been shifted. Not far. Not obvious. But enough. Ethan crouched beside it, studying the ground. Tracks. Faint. Boots. At least one person. Maybe more. They hadn't crossed into the center. Hadn't touched anything important. Just tested the boundary. Ethan stood slowly. Yeah, he said under his breath. They're curious. Shadow let out a low growl. Ethan rested a hand on his neck. Not yet, he said, but his eyes hardened. They will be. The sound came just after noon. Different this time. Closer. Louder. Not one vehicle. Two. Ethan didn't move toward the ridge. He stayed where he was, let them come into view. A black SUV rolled into sight first. Clean. New. Out of place in a place like this. Behind it, a smaller sedan followed. The vehicles slowed as they approached the edge of the property, then stopped. Engines idling. Ethan stood still, Shadow at his side. The doors opened. 3 people stepped out. A man in his 50s, well-dressed, confident, and behind him, a woman, and another man. Ethan didn't need to look twice. He already knew. His chest tightened, not from fear, from something deeper, something older. The woman stepped forward first. Her hair was shorter than he remembered, styled. Oh, careful. Her clothes were clean, expensive. Everything about her looked untouched, unchanged, except for the way she looked at him, like she didn't quite recognize what he had become. Ethan, she said. His name sounded different coming from her now. Distant, like it belonged to someone else. Ethan didn't move, didn't answer. The younger man stepped beside her, his son. Ethan could see it in the posture, the hesitation, the way he avoided looking directly at him. The other man, the one in the suit, stayed slightly behind, observing, measuring. Ethan's eyes flicked to him, then back to her. "What are you doing here?" he asked. His voice was calm, flat. The woman smiled slightly. Not warm, not real. "We've been trying to reach you," she said. Ethan let out a small breath. "No," he replied. You haven't." The smile faded just a little. She glanced around, taking in the land, the tent, the rough structures, the emptiness. "This is where you ended up?" she asked. Ethan didn't answer. The man in the suit stepped forward, professional, polished. "Mr. Brooks," he said. "My name is Daniel Harper. I represent—" "I didn't ask," Ethan cut in. Silence fell. The wind moved between them. Shadow shifted slightly, stepping closer to Ethan. Harper paused, then nodded. "Fair enough," he said. The woman stepped in again. "We're not here to argue," she said. Ethan looked at her, really looked. 38 years, gone, just like that. "You didn't come all this way to check on me," he said. Her expression tightened. "No," she admitted. Ethan nodded once. "Then say it." She hesitated, just for a moment. "And then, we want the land." The words hung in the air. Simple, direct, cold. Ethan didn't react right away. Didn't raise his voice, didn't step forward. He just stood there. Then slowly, he nodded. "Of course you do." Harper stepped in smoothly. "We're prepared to make a very fair offer," he said. "Given the condition of the property, we believe—" Ethan looked at him, and the man stopped talking, because there was something in Ethan's eyes now. Not anger, not desperation. Something else. Something steady. Something unmovable. "It's not for sale," Ethan said. The woman exhaled sharply. "Ethan, be reasonable." "I am," he replied. She stepped closer. "You can't live like this," she said. "This place, there's nothing here." Ethan glanced briefly toward the ridge, then back at her. "You're wrong," he said quietly, and Harper adjusted his stance. We have reason to believe this land holds significant potential, he said carefully. Resources that could— Ethan raised a hand slightly. The man stopped again. You don't know what's here, Ethan said. Harper's eyes narrowed. We know enough. Ethan shook his head. No, he said. You don't. The younger man finally spoke. Dad. The word landed differently, softer, uncertain. Ethan looked at him, really looked this time. For a second. Something flickered. Then it was gone. You made your choice, Ethan said. The son looked down, didn't argue. The woman's voice sharpened. This isn't about the past, she said. This is business. Ethan let out a quiet breath. No, he said. It's exactly about the past. Silence. The wind picked up slightly, carrying dust between them, and Harper stepped forward one last time. We can make this very easy for you, he said. Or very difficult. Ethan met his gaze, unblinking. You already did that, he said. And I'm still here. Shadow stepped forward slightly. Just enough. A low, steady growl filled the space between them. Not loud, but clear. Harper took a small step back. The woman's expression shifted. Frustration. Impatience. Think about it, she said. Ethan didn't respond. She turned, walking back toward the SUV. The others followed. The doors closed. Engines started. The vehicles turned. And just like that, they were leaving. Ethan didn't move until the dust settled, until the sound disappeared, until the land was quiet again. Shadow relaxed slightly, but not completely. Ethan stood there, looking out at the road they had taken. They didn't come to ask, he said quietly. Shadow didn't move. They came to see how hard it would be. He glanced back toward the ridge, toward what lay hidden beneath it, then out across the land. They'll be back. The wind moved again, but now it carried something else. Not emptiness, not silence, pressure. Ethan rested his hand on Shadow's back, his voice steady, resolved. Let them come, he said. Because this time— He looked out at the land he had built with his own hands, the land no one wanted, the land no one understood. I'm not leaving. The words stayed in the air long after the dust from the SUVs had settled. Ethan stood there for a long time, long enough for the wind to erase the tire tracks, long enough for the silence to come back. But it wasn't the same silence. Not anymore. Shadow shifted beside him, his body still tense, his eyes scanning the horizon. They won't stop, Ethan said quietly. He didn't sound angry. He sounded certain. That was worse. By evening, the sky turned a deep gray, clouds rolling in low and heavy over the mountains. The temperature dropped fast, faster than the night before. Storm coming. Ethan moved with urgency now. Everything he did had purpose. He secured the tent, reinforced the stakes, covered supplies with tarps weighted down by stones. He double-checked the bunker entrance, making sure no sign of disturbance remained. Shadow followed every step, watching, listening, waiting. The first gust of wind hit just after sunset. Sharp, cold, carrying dust that stung the skin. Ethan pulled his jacket tighter, glancing up at the sky. Yeah, he muttered. Oh, perfect timing. The storm wasn't just weather. It was cover, and he knew it. The wind howled louder as darkness settled over the land. Visibility dropped fast, the horizon disappearing into swirling dust and shadow. Ethan stayed low near the fire, keeping it small, controlled. Shadow stood at the edge of the perimeter. Then he froze. A low growl built in his chest. Ethan didn't ask. He was already moving. The wind masked everything. Sound, movement, presence. But Shadow had heard something. That was enough. Ethan stepped into the darkness, his eyes adjusting, his body shifting into something old and familiar. Something trained. "Where?" he whispered. Shadow moved forward, slow and deliberate, toward the ridge, toward the bunker. Ethan's chest tightened. Not there. Not that. They reached the edge of the ridge, but the wind screamed across it, making it hard to see, hard to hear. But then, a shape, low, crouched, near the ground, not moving naturally. Working. Ethan's jaw tightened. Someone was digging. Shadow lunged forward with a sharp bark. The figure jerked, startled, scrambling backward. "Hey!" Ethan shouted. The wind swallowed his voice. The figure ran, fast, sliding down the slope, disappearing into the storm. Ethan didn't chase. He moved to the spot instead, dropped to one knee. His hands brushed across the ground. The cover. Disturbed. Not fully exposed, but close. Too close. "They found it," he said under his breath. Shadow circled, barking once into the darkness. Then, another sound, behind them, closer. Ethan turned sharply. Too late. A second figure moved out of the storm, rushing forward. But not toward Ethan. Toward the supplies. Toward the tent. A diversion. Ethan's body reacted instantly. "Shadow!" The dog was already moving. Fast. Silent. The figure reached the edge of the camp, grabbing at one of the supply bags, and Shadow hit him, hard. The man stumbled, falling back, losing his grip as Shadow barked loudly, teeth bared, keeping distance but not retreating. Ethan closed the gap in seconds. "Stop!" he shouted. The man scrambled to his feet, backing away, hands up. "I'm leaving! I'm leaving!" Ethan didn't move closer, didn't lower his stance. "Who sent you?" he demanded. The man shook his head quickly. "No one. I swear," Shadow growled louder. The man flinched. Okay, he shouted. "I was just told to check the place." "By who?" The man hesitated. That was all Ethan needed to see. "Oh, yeah," Ethan said quietly. "That's what I thought." The man took another step back, then ran, vanishing into the storm the same way the first one had. Ethan stood still, breathing controlled, watching, waiting. But they didn't come back. The wind howled louder. The storm swallowed everything again. Shadow returned to his side, still alert, still ready. Ethan looked down at him. "You all right?" Shadow's chest rose and fell fast, but he stood firm. Ethan nodded once. "Good." Then he turned back toward the ridge, toward the disturbed ground, toward the place they had almost exposed. His expression hardened. "They're not guessing anymore," he said. "They know there's something here." The storm raged on, but Ethan didn't go back to the fire. Didn't sit, didn't rest. He worked, through the wind, through the cold, reinforcing, covering, protecting. By the time the storm began to ease hours later, his hands were numb, his clothes coated in dust and dirt. But the ridge looked untouched again, like it had never been disturbed, like nothing was there. Ethan stood back, breathing slow, steady. Shadow sat beside him, watching, waiting. The silence returned once more, but it wasn't peaceful. It was heavy. Ethan turned toward the camp, and that's when he saw it. The damage. One of the supply crates, broken open, tools scattered, food partially gone, not everything. Just enough. A message. Ethan walked slowly through the camp, taking it all in, measured, controlled. They weren't trying to take everything, he said quietly. Shadow followed him closely. They were testing how far they could go. He stopped near the tent, but his eyes darkened. And now they know. The wind softened. The storm passed. But something else had taken its place. A line had been crossed. Ethan knelt beside the broken crate, picking up one of the scattered tools. He turned it in his hand, then set it down. They sent people in the dark, he said. Used the storm. He looked out across the land, toward the direction the vehicles had come from. That means this isn't over the land anymore. He stood slowly, his body steady, his voice calm. It's about control. Shadow stood with him. Ethan rested a hand on his neck. They think I'm alone. A pause, a breath. Then, let them. The sky began to clear, stars slowly returning above the land. But the calm didn't reach him, not anymore. Because this time, they hadn't just come to look. They had come to take. And next time, they wouldn't come quietly. The morning came slow, heavy. The kind of morning where the light didn't feel like relief. It felt like exposure. Ethan hadn't slept. Not really. He sat just outside the tent, back straight, eyes scanning the land as the first light spread across the hills. Every shadow, every ridge, every movement of grass in the wind. He tracked it all. Shadow lay beside him, but not resting, watching, waiting. The storm had passed, but what it brought with it hadn't. Ethan stood, stretching slowly, his joints stiff but his movements controlled. We're done reacting, he said quietly. Shadow's ears flicked. Ethan looked toward the ridge, then toward the open land. They made their move, he continued. Now we make ours. The town Caleb mentioned sat farther than it should have. 40 minutes, most if the roads were clear. Closer to an hour if they weren't. Ethan hadn't planned to leave. Not yet. But things had changed. He loaded the truck carefully. What little fuel he had. A list in his head. Tools, supplies, and something else. Information. Shadow jumped into the passenger seat without hesitation. Ethan glanced at him. Stay sharp, he said. The engine turned over with a rough growl. Then they were moving. The land stretched behind them as the truck rolled down the uneven dirt path, dust trailing in the rearview mirror. Ethan didn't look back. The town appeared slowly. A handful of buildings, a gas station, a small grocery, a diner with a faded sign that had probably seen better decades. Nothing fancy, nothing modern. But it was alive. People moved, talked, watched us, and when Ethan's truck rolled in, they noticed. Outsiders didn't come through here often, especially not ones who looked like him. Ethan parked near the gas pump, stepping out slowly. Shadow followed. Heads turned, not aggressively, just curious. Measured. Ethan filled the tank, his eyes moving just as much as anyone else's, taking in faces, positions, reactions. A man leaned against the side of the station, arms crossed, watching him a little too closely. Ethan noted it, filed it away. Inside the store, the air smelled of coffee and old wood. A woman behind the counter glanced up, then did a double take. You new around here? She asked. Ethan nodded. Just got some land out west. Her expression shifted slightly. Out there? She said. You serious? Yeah. She let out a small breath. Oh, well. You picked a quiet place? Ethan didn't respond. He grabbed what he needed. Basic supplies. Nothing that stood out. But enough. As he set the items on the counter, she leaned forward slightly. You should talk to Caleb, she said. Ethan looked at her. Why's that? She shrugged. He knows that land better than anyone. Ethan gave a small nod. Already met him. Her eyebrows lifted. Did you now? He paid, gathered his things, and stepped back outside. Shadow was waiting. Still, watching. Ethan loaded the supplies into the truck, then paused. The man from earlier, the one leaning against the station, was gone. Ethan's eyes scanned the area. Then, movement. Across the street. The man stood near a parked vehicle, speaking quietly to someone inside. Their eyes flicked toward Ethan, then away, once Ethan didn't react. He climbed into the truck, started the engine. Yeah, he said under his breath. They're not even trying to hide it now. The drive back felt longer. He kept his speed steady, his eyes moving, checking, watching. And when the land finally came back into view, something felt off. Not obvious, not at first glance, but wrong. Ethan slowed the truck. Shadow sat upright, alert. Ethan parked before reaching the camp, got out slowly. His boots hit the dirt with quiet purpose. Stay close, he murmured. They moved forward together, step by step. The perimeter came into view. Everything looked the same, until it didn't. The markers shifted again, more this time. Not subtle, not careful, intentional. A message. Ethan's jaw tightened. They stepped into the camp, and then he saw it. The tent. Slashed. Clean. Deliberate. Not torn by wind. Not damaged by animals. Cut. Ethan stopped. For a moment he didn't move, didn't speak. The silence pressed in around him. Shadow moved ahead, sniffing, circling, checking. Then, a sharp bark. Ethan's head snapped toward him. Shadow! He moved fast, around the side of the tent. And there, the ground, disturbed, darkened. Ethan dropped to one knee. His hand pressed against the dirt, then lifted. Blood. Not a lot, but enough. Ethan's chest tightened. Shadow. The dog stood a few feet away, breathing steady, but one of his front legs, a thin line of red ran down it. Not deep, but fresh. Ethan's hands moved instantly, checking. Careful, controlled. You're all right, he said quietly. Stay still. Shadow didn't resist, didn't pull away. Ethan tore a strip from his sleeve, wrapping it around the wound, tight enough to stop the bleeding, loose enough not to hurt. His hands were steady, but his eyes changed. Someone came back, he said. Shadow's ears flicked. They didn't take anything. He looked around. Nothing else was missing. Nothing else destroyed. Just the tent, the markers, and Shadow. A warning. Ethan stood slowly, his breathing even, too even. They touched you, he said. Not loud, not angry, but something in his voice shifted, something deeper, something final. He turned, scanning the land, the open space to the horizon. They crossed the line. Shadow stood beside him again, wounded, but unbroken. Ethan rested a hand on his neck. You did good, he said quietly. A pause. Then. We're done waiting. The wind moved across the land again, but now it didn't carry silence. It carried something else. A change. Ethan walked toward the ridge, toward the hidden bunker. toward the only thing they hadn't touched. Yet. His voice was low, resolved. They want to see what's here? He glanced down at Shadow, then out at the land. Then they're gonna find out the hard way. He stepped forward. This isn't theirs to take. The words didn't echo. They settled. Heavy. Permanent. Ethan didn't rush. Didn't react with anger. That wasn't who he was anymore. That wasn't how you survived something like this. He moved with intention, with clarity, with purpose. The bunker hatch opened with a low, controlled sound, the metal scraping softly against the earth. Ethan climbed down first. And Shadow followed, slower this time, favoring his leg but refusing to stay behind. The darkness swallowed them, but it wasn't unfamiliar anymore. It was theirs. Ethan sealed the hatch above them, cutting off the outside world. For a moment, there was silence. Then the soft, steady sound of water returned. Grounding. Real. Ethan moved deeper into the chamber, lighting a lantern he had set aside the night before. Warm light filled the space. The reinforced walls, the water basin, the storage areas he had begun to build. Everything was still intact, untouched. For now, Ethan knelt beside the stream, letting the water run through his fingers again. This is what they're after, he said quietly. Shadow lay beside him, resting but alert. They don't even understand it. He stood slowly, eyes scanning the structure, the system, the potential. They just see money, he continued. But this, he gestured around them. This is life. Shadow lifted his head slightly. Ethan gave a small nod. Yeah. Then he moved. Not to hide, not to run, but to prepare. Hours passed. Ethan organized everything with precision. Water flow paths, storage reinforcement, access points. He marked sections, mapped routes in his head. Every inch of the bunker became something more than shelter. It became strategy. When he finally climbed back to the surface, the light had shifted. Late afternoon. The land stretched quiet again. Too quiet. Ethan stood there for a moment, listening. Then, the sound came. Engines. Multiple. Not distant this time. Close. Approaching. Ethan didn't move toward the truck. Didn't hide. He stayed where he was, when Shadow stood beside him. Still. The vehicles appeared over the ridge. 3 this time. The black SUV, the sedan, and a third truck. Heavier. Utility. They didn't slow at the edge. They drove in, right onto the land, dust rising behind them. Ethan's eyes didn't change, didn't flinch. They stopped a short distance away. Doors opened. More people stepped out this time. Not just Harper. Not just his ex-wife. Not just his son. Others. Workers. Men who didn't ask questions. Who followed instructions. Harper stepped forward again. Confident. Like he already knew how this would end. Mr. Brooks, he said. Ethan didn't answer. Harper smiled faintly. I'm glad we could resolve this quickly. Ethan tilted his head slightly. We didn't resolve anything. Harper gestured behind him. The men moved toward the land. Toward the ridge. Ethan stepped forward once. That was enough. They stopped. The air shifted instantly. You don't want to do that, Ethan said. His voice wasn't loud, but it carried. Harper's smile faded. You don't have the authority to stop us, he replied. Ethan's eyes locked onto his. You don't have the right to be here. The woman stepped forward, her voice sharper now. We tried to be fair, Ethan. Ethan looked at her. No anger, just distance. You stopped being fair a long time ago. The younger man stood behind her, silent, watching, torn. Harper took another step. "This land is under dispute," he said. "And until that's resolved—" "It's mine," Ethan cut in. Silence. The wind moved between them again. Harper's expression hardened. "Then we'll let the courts decide that." Ethan nodded slowly. "Oh, good," he said. "Let's do that." Harper frowned. That wasn't the response he expected. Ethan reached into his pocket, pulled out his phone, something he hadn't used much since arriving. Until now. He tapped the screen once, then held it up. A recording. Video. Harper's eyes narrowed. Ethan spoke calmly. "You came onto private property," he said. "Sent people here at night. Damaged my supplies. Hurt my dog." The words landed heavier than anything before. The men behind Harper shifted slightly. Uncomfortable. Ethan continued. "And now you're here again." He lowered the phone slightly. "But this time, I'm not alone." A voice came from behind the vehicles. "Damn right you're not." Everyone turned. Caleb stepped forward. Not alone. A sheriff walked beside him, 2 deputies behind, and Caleb's expression was calm but firm. "You picked the wrong land," he said. Harper's confidence cracked, just slightly. The sheriff stepped forward. "Everyone step away from the property," he said. "Now!" The tension snapped. The workers backed off first, then the others. Harper stayed still for a moment longer, then adjusted his jacket. "This isn't over," he said. Ethan didn't respond. Didn't need to. The woman looked at him one last time. Something in her expression shifted. Not power, not control. Something closer to realization. Then she turned. The vehicles started. Engines roared. And one by one, they left. Dust filled the air again. But this time, it cleared differently. Caleb walked up beside Ethan. "You all right?" he asked. Ethan nodded. "Yeah." The sheriff glanced around. "Well, file a report," he said. "We'll take it from here." Ethan nodded again. "Appreciate it." Shadow stood close. Steady. Calm. Ethan rested a hand on his neck. Caleb looked out across the land, then back at Ethan. "Told you," he said quietly. "People give up on what they don't understand." Ethan gave a small nod. "Yeah." He looked out across the land again. The same land, but not the same story. "Turns out," his voice was steady, clear. "They were looking in the wrong place." The wind moved softly now, no longer heavy, no longer pressing. For the first time in days, it felt like something had lifted. Not everything. Not yet. But enough. Enough to breathe. Enough to stand. Enough to know. This wasn't over. But it was finally turning. And for the first time, the truth wasn't hidden anymore. But the land looked the same. It always did. Dry hills, open sky, wind moving through grass that refused to grow the way it should. But everything about it had changed. Not the land itself, the man standing on it. Ethan stood near the ridge, hands resting loosely at his sides, eyes scanning the horizon the way he always did. But there was no tension in his shoulders now, no weight pressing down on his chest, just awareness, just presence. Shadow sat beside him, older now, the fur around his muzzle touched with gray, the scar along his front leg visible when he shifted his weight. But it didn't slow him, didn't change him. If anything, it made him more certain, more grounded. Ethan glanced down at him. "You earned that one," he said quietly. Shadow looked up, calm, unshaken. The wind moved softly across the land, while carrying something different now, voices, not far off. Ethan turned. Down the slope near the edge of the property, a small group of people stood gathered. Men and women, some older, some not. All watching, all waiting. Ethan walked toward them slowly. Shadow followed. The group shifted slightly as he approached, not out of fear, out of respect. A man stepped forward, mid-50s, worn face, eyes that had seen things they didn't talk about. "You Ethan?" he asked. Ethan nodded. "Yeah." The man extended a hand. "Name's Rick." Ethan shook it. Firm, simple. Rick glanced around the land, then back at Ethan. "Heard about what you built out here," he said. Ethan didn't respond right away. Rick continued. "Word travels," he added. A faint smile touched Ethan's face. "Yeah," he said. Seems like it." Another man stepped forward, then a woman, then another. Different stories, same look in their eyes, the kind that didn't need explaining. Rick spoke again. "They said you made this place work," he said. Ethan glanced toward the ridge, toward what lay beneath it, then back at them. "I didn't make it work," he said. "I just stopped looking at it the way everyone else did." The group exchanged quiet looks. Understanding, not curiosity. Understanding. Rick nodded slowly. "Mind if we see it?" he asked. Ethan looked at them. Really looked. At the way they stood. At the way they held themselves. At the things they weren't saying. At the things he already knew. A long moment passed. Then he nodded. "Yeah," he said. "Come on." The hatch opened. One by one, they climbed down. So their reactions were quiet. Not loud. Not dramatic. Just still. Taking it in. The water. The structure. The space. The possibility. Ethan watched them. Not with pride. Not exactly. With something deeper. Recognition. Rick stepped closer to the stream, kneeling, running his hand through the water. He exhaled slowly. "Didn't think I'd ever see something like this," he said. Ethan leaned against the wall. "You don't see it," he replied. "You build it." The group stayed for a while, not asking too many questions, not needing to, because some things didn't need explaining. When they climbed back up, the light had softened. Late afternoon again. Time moved differently out here. Slower, more honest. Rick turned to Ethan. "There's more of us," he said. Ethan nodded. "I figured." Rick hesitated. Then, "We could help," he said. Ethan looked at him, at all of them, then out at the land. For a long time he had been alone. Then, not alone. Then, fighting. And now, something else. He nodded once. "Yeah," he said. "I know." The group didn't stay long. They didn't need to. They left the same way they came. Quiet, respectful, real. Ethan watched them go, then turned back toward the ridge. Shadow sat beside him again. Always there, always steady. Ethan lowered himself onto the ground, resting his back against the earth. The sky stretched wide above him, endless, unchanging. For a long time he just sat there, breathing, thinking. Not about the past, not about what had been taken, but about what remained. A sound broke the quiet. Soft footsteps. Ethan didn't turn right away. He already knew. She said you might still be here. The voice was familiar, but different. Ethan turned. His son stood a few yards away. Alone. No suit. No car waiting. Just him. He looked older. Not in years, in weight, in understanding. Ethan didn't stand. Didn't move toward him. He just waited. The young man stepped closer. Slow. Careful. I didn't come for the land, he said. Ethan said nothing. I didn't know, he continued, about what they were doing, about all of it. A pause. I should have, he added quietly. The wind moved between them, carrying the silence. I'm sorry, the son said. The words didn't come easy. That mattered. Ethan looked at him. Really looked. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Then Ethan nodded. Once, no. Not forgiveness, not rejection. Something in between. I know, he said. The son exhaled. Relief, but not resolution. Not yet. Can I? He hesitated. Can I come back? Help? Ethan looked out across the land, then down at Shadow, then back at him. You can come back, Ethan said. The son's shoulders eased slightly. But not to take anything, Ethan added. Only to build. The son nodded. I understand. Ethan held his gaze a moment longer, then looked away. The conversation didn't need anything more. The son stepped back, then turned, walking the same path the others had, not as part of something, not yet, but not outside it anymore either. Ethan leaned back again, the sky above him turning gold, then orange, then slowly fading into blue. Shadow lay beside him, close, always close. Ethan rested a hand on his neck. You stayed, he said quietly. Shadow didn't move, didn't need to. Ethan smiled slightly. Yeah, he murmured. Me too. The wind moved across the land one last time. Not harsh, not heavy, just steady. And in that moment, everything that had been taken from him felt distant. Not gone, but no longer in control. Because what remained was enough. And for the first time in a long time, Ethan Brooks wasn't surviving anymore. He was living. And if this story meant something to you, even just a little, I want you to do something simple. Drop a 1 in the comments if you believe loyalty still matters. Drop a 0 if you think people like Ethan are being forgotten. No long message needed. Just one number. Because every comment tells us, you're still here with us. And if you made it all the way to the end of this story, you're not just watching, you're part of it. So go ahead, hit that subscribe button, because the next story might hit even closer to home, and we'll be right here, together.